Hi, everyone. You're already excellent at networking, so I'm expecting lots of good questions out of this session. I'm Amanda Rogers, CEO of WK Digital, and I am the session chair, so anything unrelated to blockchain, I am very happy to answer the questions. You probably know where the toilets are. Maybe the coffee machine's working out there. We're at the end of the day, so it's not really that harsh in terms of at 5:30 we need to finish, but maybe someone will come around and say, get out, and if so, I did warn you in advance. Does everyone have their phones switched off in general so we can hear all of the awesome things that these ladies have to say and wisdom? I'll be over here. Otherwise, here we go.
So I'm Madeline Murray. I'm a technical writer / product owner / a few other things with Pegasus. We're the protocol engineering spoke of Consensus, which is a globally distributed remote first team that's building blockchain technology on the Ethereum blockchain. It's a bit of a mouthful. I imagine you've probably all heard of blockchain at this point, so I'm not going to go into the technical details in this. Sally over there, one of my colleagues, is going to be talking all about our Ethereum client tomorrow, if you do want to hear about technical details. So I've always felt this quote from Andrew Key sums it up pretty well for me. As the internet transformed and commoditised how society communicates, blockchain will transform and commoditise how society agrees, trusts and transacts. So cryptocurrency, that's one application for blockchain, but we're really just at the start of what blockchain's going to do and figuring out all the ways it can be applied. So it makes it a really exciting space to be in. And one of the other great things is all the amazing supportive people I've met in the space. And here go some of them. And I'm going to hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm a co-founder of Bloom Technologies. I work with another co-founder who is a Java developer, and we're working on proof of stake in the proof of stake industry, which is a consensus mechanism under public cryptocurrencies. And we're building an application in this area.
Hi, my name is Katrina Donaghy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a technology company called Civic Ledger. We've been around for nearly 3 years, and we work with government to solve some interesting problems using blockchain technology.
Hey, I'm Chantal Delray. I'm co-founder in Amber, which is an app where we help people dollar cost average into Bitcoin. So we're a Bitcoin-based company and built upon Bitcoin. Yeah.
I'm Karen Cohen. I run my own consulting in a weird intersection between HR and blockchain technology.
So I guess the first question I've got to ask you all is, how did you end up in blockchain? Did you choose it, or did you land in it by accident and love it?
I'll probably start. I think the interesting thing, we sort of ask ourselves these questions all the time. It's one of the standard questions we ask is about, tell us the moment when blockchain technology found you. And you watch people's eyes change and light up, because it actually is a very profound moment when all of a sudden you're thinking about solving a problem, and then this word or this thing comes along and taps you on the shoulder and asks you to take a look at it. I remember way back in 2015, we'll all have a little date stamp about when we found this tech, or this tech found us. But you spend a little bit of time battering it away because of what we believe, what the hype was. Now, way back then, we didn't have hype. We were still the cryptocurrency was still very unknown. So you either open yourself up to this technology, or you'll batter it away until finally it'll just keep on tapping you and say, you must find out about this tech. So I found it, it found me in about November 2015, and it was because there was some information about Craig Wright in the Courier Mail, and I don't know if anyone knows Craig Wright in this room. Google him, it's a bit scary, but he makes a lot of claims. Anyway, the ATO were pursuing him, and I took some interest, and then I was at my children's library, and I saw a book about Bitcoin, and I picked it up and read it. And that was a profound moment for me. That's when I realised that everything that I've been thinking about for many years, I finally had something in my hands that could actually enable me to solve some problems using this profound technology. And the journey's been ongoing ever since.
Should I go? Yeah? Okay. The way that I actually fell into, working into this space is I don't have a tech background at all. My background is solely in design and marketing. And I actually moved into with my housemate, and I was working at RACQ, and I was brought in to manage the design processing systems when they're merging between QT Mutual Bank and RACQ. And during that time, I was also studying a double degree in psychology and finance, because I kind of really wanted to go down this pathway of trading. And my housemate turned around to me and told me basically I was an idiot for studying finance, because it's going to be redundant with all of like Bitcoin and digital currencies coming up. So I fell into it basically because of him, and he told me to start trading, and I started trading in Bitcoin and everything else, and figured out how complicated it was, and being an OCD designer, I wanted to make it easy. So that's what we've done. Yeah.
So my background is in HR, and I was actually at a party, and one of the directors of a blockchain company came up and asked me if I want to work for a blockchain company. And I had no idea what a blockchain was. I asked my husband, he told me, my eyes glazed over. I thought, oh, well, I'll just give it a go. So I found myself working in the industry. What really, I guess the aha moment for me was the people and the community. Everyone believes in it so much. Everybody believes in, digital currency, in blockchain technology. It's catchy. So, started running meetups, getting to know the community, and then I've sort of stayed in this industry and helping people to get roles in the industry and working with a lot of startup projects. So it's been hugely fun, actually.
For me, I was studying economics, and in the economics community, particularly at the university, Bitcoin inevitably sort of came up as a point of discussion with the lecturers and the students. I think it was around mid-2014 when Bitcoin kind of went on a small rise. It brought attention to the asset. So we were discussing it quite a lot at that point, and I became very interested in it, read the Bitcoin white paper, and rest is history, I guess.
I think it is. I think the Bitcoin white paper is the most, if you are interested in this technology, that's your 0 point, that's your genesis block. You must read that paper. It's only about 11 pages long, but it'll actually give you a very strong foundation about why this technology is offering something different. I mean, when we think about blockchain, those elements have been around for a long time, cryptography, distributed databases. It was just because it came together in this white paper that it asked a different question or proposed it in a different way. We've all mentioned our background, so I'm actually a social scientist. I'm a humanities graduate. So I studied gender studies, politics, cultural theory, philosophy, ethics. So for me, why do I actually found this technology so easy for me to associate with? It's because blockchain is about governance. It's about how we actually organise society. So blockchain technology creates a different way for us to transact value, but you need to have an agreement or consensus of the governance of those rules enabling those transactions to occur. So it requires different mindsets. Yes, we have coders that are responsible for coding the technology, but before the code actually happens, we need diversity around the table to ask ourselves, where does this data come from? How do we agree? What's the governance? What's the ethics? What if we actually put this data in the ledgers? It's immutable. It's not going to be removed. So we have to really agree and be very careful about how we design solutions to the problems using this technology. So we have economists, social scientists, marketing, and HR, because this is about people. This is about society and how we interact with each other. So you'll find in Australia that most of the blockchain companies and the crypto are actually founded by women. All the most profound blockchain companies in this country are founded by women, or you'll find them as co-founders. And the reason why is because we actually look at the problem that we want to solve. The blockchain technology is a tool for us to redesign and reimagine problems that we've found it really difficult to solve in the past. How do we solve digital identity? How do we solve digital assets? How do we give them value? We're going to move towards a society that's completely digitised. So how do we solve the double spend problem? How do we create provenance? How do we know something is authenticated to actually have that asset? All of that is very difficult under legacy systems, and we spend a lot of money putting people in intermediary roles so we can actually trust those transactions because we don't know what's happening in the background around the governance. So, I mean, we have really different conversations around when we're together as women about the technology, and I find that so exciting that we as women are actually standing at the front of the bleeding edge, and it is bloody bleeding, I can tell you that. We do live in a bubble. We get told that all the time. The language we speak, and Karen's probably she's got a little anecdote about the language. The language we speak is very unusual, so we're very mindful that the way we speak, we have to keep reminding ourselves, don't use the word blockchain, talk about the problems you're solving and how you're actually rethinking problems. So Karen, you've got a fabulous way of describing some of the language.
Oh.
Remember, we had our APAC blockchain conference last week in Sydney, and we had our Sydney Women in Blockchain meetup, and Karen she opened up the session with the different languages and different meanings and everything like that.
Yeah, I think, you very quickly get stuck into the jargon, and, I think to Chantel's point, we need to keep it simple. So, the difference between cryptocurrency and fiat, I didn't know what that meant.
Even what fiat was.
Yeah, that's right.
I get asked that all the time.
We take that for granted. Fiat is just normal currency, and then we start to talk about digital currency. And I work, one of my major clients is actually NEM, and so one of our biggest issues is in the industry is people pay each other in tokens, and then what does that mean from a tax perspective? Because you suddenly get caught with this token that was worth $1, now is worth 5 cents, but I paid tax on it at $1. So, looking at the attractiveness for employees across a global perspective, getting money out of a NEM token and into fiat, where people actually can understand how to pay tax. That's been a really big HR issue, which nobody probably would have had to solve before, the last couple of years. And I'm sure the same thing goes with a lot of your projects.
Yeah.
Katrina touched on something really important before. This is a technology that's potentially, has the potential to have a huge impact on a huge amount of areas, and we need women in it. So Karen wrote an article earlier this year, and she runs a Women in Blockchain meetup. So I thought, Karen, you might be able to talk a bit about why is it so important that we want more women in the industry.
Do you pledge?
I did a pledge. So my pledge was at the end of the Sydney Women in Blockchain, I made everyone stand up and put up their hand and say, I'll never run a panel without a woman on it again. And they'd all pledged that, so now they have to keep up with it.
We got it all in photos, and
Yeah.
so we know who's actually in
I
that
think
room.
today they were talking about manels, yeah. So, and there was a panel at the APAC blockchain conference that had 6 men on it, and Katrina and I were going nuts. We're like, let's find a woman who can talk about Facebook and crypto. And it was hard actually to find someone who felt confident amongst 6 men and 6 experts to be able to speak about that.
They weren't experts.
Well, they call themselves experts. Yeah, so why we need more women in blockchain. So if we think about cryptocurrency, it's complex. If we can't tap it or slide it, or we don't know how to use it. I'm sure, Chantel, this is a problem that you find all the time on Amber. But so only 8% of users are women. So we've got a long way to go with getting that into the mainstream. And then on top of that, a lot of the startups and a lot of the projects are by geeky young guys who wouldn't even consider to get a woman onto their advisory panel. So I actually stood up once and said, every project needs a woman on their advisory panel, and that was a little bit controversial, even ended up in the Australian newspaper that, I'd said that. So, I think we are surrounded by a lot of young, great minds, great guys who can talk about these projects, but we just need to keep including women, keep including them in meetups, keep including them in projects, keep including them on boards. Like it's about inclusiveness at every single level. And I think we just heard from a panel about engineers, and they were talking about starting at kinder, talking about engineering and attracting more girls into the industry. But it's not just kinder, it's not just uni, it's also talking about throughout your career, and keep bringing women into these career conversations and making sure we're at every level. And that's a lot of planning. That's not just, one conversation.
I guess one of the things, so with blockchain, you hear the term thrown around, and before I got my job, I was like, I should learn about that. But it seems overwhelming. You don't know where to start. So I guess if you guys could talk about, was there anything you found difficult at the start, or you were apprehensive about, or?
Oh, sorry, just on that, maybe, I don't know where everyone else is going to, but maybe the difference between blockchain and crypto is built on, is it something?
Yeah. Yeah, so the difference, so the blockchain is the immutable ledger. So cryptocurrency is one application of blockchain. So Bitcoin is the Bitcoin blockchain. And then you have the crypto, so it's sort of purpose built for Bitcoin. And then Ethereum is a public blockchain that can also run smart contracts. So you can do things on it. You can program on it. It's got an EVM in it.
I always
Executes them.
use the analogy, it's a bit basic, but when we think about Microsoft, Microsoft has an operating system and it has applications on top of it, like Word, PowerPoint, and all of them have a standard, a data standard that actually works on that operating system. So when we think about blockchain, blockchain's like you're operating your foundational technology, and we build applications on top of it. That's basically taking the protocol. But yeah, so the crypto is one of the most successful applications because when we look at the Bitcoin paper, it was about payments. So that was the original application of blockchain technology, was around moving money across from one person to the other, and the ledger recording who actually had that. So we all knew how much crypto was actually in the market. So it couldn't be double spent.
So that was much better of an explanation than involved the EVM.
That's a social scientist speaking.
Yeah, and just to summarise it as well, really clearly, it's like the first scarce digital asset. So with scarcity inbuilt.
Yeah, so it's a deflationary currency. So there's only 21 million BTCs that can be mined. I think we're up to about 19 million now. So that's why the computable power behind this to actually mine crypto is getting harder and harder. But I think when we talk about was there any barriers to actually entering this phrase language called blockchain, I think the only barrier that you have is yourself.
I actually agree with that, 100%.
It's yourself that puts yourself up and says, no, that's all technical and it's all too hard, so therefore I'm going to stay away from it. It's like every emerging technology or every discipline. You feel that, as women, you feel like you need to own 100% of it before you even put your hand forward and say, I can now do this. This is not about being technically savvy. This is about putting yourself into something that is really quite interesting, that solves problems that you probably already have an interest in solving problems, but want to know, can I solve it differently with a different technology? So my journey started because I had it's a long story, but my pivotal moment, I think most of you in this room will know Leanne Kemp, who's our chief entrepreneur and also the founder and CEO of Everledger. So I had a moment with her in April 2016 at the Innovation Summit, which was our first ever Innovation Summit. She was the only person on that stage talking about blockchain technology. We had the most amazing minds on that room, and none of them actually identified this technology as profoundly transformational, but she did. And I'd been following her for months and months and months, and I finally got to meet her. And I remember I went up to her and I was starry-eyed. I was just, just overwhelmed by this amazing human. And she asked me, I said, I complained about Brisbane and how quiet we were and we weren't doing anything. She just told me to shut up and do something. And I think but it's a serious thing, because we all stand back and we go, no, I'm just going to stay in my job and maybe, perhaps. But we all as women have actually built interesting companies, but we also provide mechanisms for women to engage with us and the work we do through the various meetups we do. Karen does everything in Melbourne. Madeline does Queerical Sundays. Chantel does all her amazing work with Amber, the Amber community, and I do the Brisbane and Women in Blockchain. And we do all of this for free to ensure that we're giving you a safe place to actually come and learn and ask questions.
I think one of the things for me too, because it's an emerging tech, I'd actually been out of the workforce when I had young kids. And it's sort of ironic that to actually come back into an emerging technology has kind of worked in my advantage, because it's new to most people. When I came in, most people who come into at Pegasus, most people who come in are new to the blockchain. So in some ways, the fact it's such a new field actually offers you additional opportunities, especially on the technical side, because it's a new technology to most people who get involved at this point. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it can seem more intimidating because of that.
And I think it's about communication. So the work that Chantel, you do in terms of detecking and turning it into a language that becomes a lot more usable to understand is what you've been able to do at Amber.
Yeah, and I think it kind of touches back onto your point. You are the only person that stops you from doing anything. And for me, coming in as a designer and a marketer into a space that's so tech savvy, even I remember I had so many troubles with one of my ex-co-founders because we got rid of him.
You do that a lot too.
Yeah, he basically made my life a living hell because he kept saying to me, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what this is. You're just a designer. You're just a designer. You don't even deserve to be here." Da da da. And eventually, I said, like, "Okay, but you've built all this tech, but how are people going to use it? How are we going to get it out to the industry?" And that's where I add value. And you know, it's the same with anyone. If you're an accountant but you're interested in this type of field, then go and be an accountant at a Bitcoin or blockchain company. Like, I don't see why you can't do it. You need to have a different perspective in whatever you do, and all of us can add that. So,
Yeah, I think that's the really, and it comes back to the diversity thing. Yeah, look, we bring a different perspective, and it's so important. It's diversity that builds good things. So, we touched on something before. So Madeline here studied economics. So, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You know, there's a lot of profound implications for economics. I'm wondering if you could talk about that. And
Yeah, I mean, just back to Bitcoin as a very kind of simplified way of looking at it. With Bitcoin, it has an inbuilt inflation schedule in terms of how many coins are released over time, meaning that it's a rock-solid form of money or gold if you were to hold it in that way as a digital alternative. So the reason gold was so valuable is that it was very difficult to mine and acquire. So the stocks did not change quickly over time. And Bitcoin has a similar properties in that way, which gives it incredible upside in terms of its value. Yeah.
can I actually just ask the audience a question? Does anyone hold Bitcoin here? Yeah?
Of course you do, Kai.
I really suggest if you're going to be getting into this sort of industry is actually dabbling in it as well prior to going into it, just so you can actually have a play. That was like my first turning point, was actually playing with it. And if you want, you can download my app to do that. But yeah, it's something that I definitely end up doing before going in.
What is the education entry point? Because we've all had classes in various IT subjects where we were almost out of date learning them, especially if it was in uni. So this one is especially on the bleeding edge. How do you, what's that education, and not even formalized, but what's the right entry point so that, other than the safe spaces, where is that? Is it?
so I'm just getting this slide up. Oh, no, back.
I'll just.
I don't know if you can read those. So, yeah, you're right, though, it's really fast moving. So some of the universities now have introduced blockchain short courses. I think Katrina, RMIT.
Yeah, we've got RMIT, which we have a student in the room today. So I guess it depends on what you want to learn. Definitely, like, obviously, strategy is a really important part of the journey about how do we understand, how do we actually think about the technology, how do we apply it to problems. And that requires strategy. It's not about the technology and putting the technology into a problem. It's about how do you think about it, how do you actually problem solve. And I think for majority disciplines, we all got to have those skill sets about how to problem solve. How do we actually cooperate around a problem, and how do we then synthesize it, support it by a hypothesis, and then experiment. So I think in most disciplines, we all have to do that. I mean, it's not necessarily specific just to technology.
I think it's multidisciplinary, and it's a really good question, because if you went to uni and did a 4-year course on blockchain, it'd probably change before you even graduate. And it really is a good reflection on our education system. How are they going to teach us something that we don't know that we're going to need in 4 or 5 years? Like what? And so I think to Katrina's point, any discipline, HR, marketing, IT, engineering, anything that we learn, as long as we become adaptable and we self-teach what's going on in this industry right now. So you ask us about the entry point. The entry point is the 101s, the meetups, the startups, join a team. They're always happy for help. Walk into a pitch night, in any meetup and go, hey, I'm good at this. Do you need help? And they'll be like, yeah, thanks, right? And then you only learn the language and you learn the technology by being in it. So probably the majority of blockchain programmers taught themselves.
So on the technology side, it's part of the ethos of blockchain is the majority of projects are open source. So you can actually get on, you can look at the code, you can get involved. So Pantheon, Pegasus, like our stuff's all open source. We've got an open GitHub page, you can get on there and ask questions, we'll answer them. We tried to run a workshop today, somewhat successfully, I don't know if anybody was there. But yeah, and in terms of like, I learned about blockchain on the job. I didn't know much before I started. I got the job interview and then I like dived in and read a lot of 101s and started working. So again, you'll find like a lot of people, and yeah, if you work in the technology side, Sally down, I keep pointing at Sally and Sandra, they're down in our R&D teams and software engineers. Like again, so many people I knew, it's not like they went off and did blockchain education before they came in. They had programming careers doing something else, then they got a job with us and dived into the blockchain world. So, and I think, yeah, it's really supportive because, yeah, I think someone said before, you know, the people really believe in it, so, yeah.
I would just say to read a lot of books in the area. So Andreas Antonopoulos was a great entry point for myself. His books, The Internet of Money, Volume 1 and 2, are just brilliant books on an introduction to the space and learning about Bitcoin, blockchain, and the potential of the technology. Yeah.
And Medium's also a great source as well, if you guys like reading articles too. I think that's a great place to go on to just follow whoever.
So has anyone got a specific question to us about what you think is maybe a potential? Yes, Bernadette?
It's not so much a question as a comment, but this is a really special, there are windows of opportunity that come along every sometimes 15 or 20 years to get into a field in technology. And 1995 was a great time to get involved with the web when there were 14 HTML tags. And you go back in CSS1, or even that was years later. But this is a really great time, and I really appreciated you saying that women lead in the innovation around this area. And as an employer, not this moment, but in the past, one of the things we always asked is, what communities are you in? What do you kind of do in your spare time on weekends, evenings? Not to like pride, but around the job related area.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will tell us.
That's actually, yeah, that's a really good point, Bernadette, because when people come to us and want to work with in this space, it is exactly that. It's what are you hungry? Are you showing that you actually have skin in the game? Are you involved in going to meetups? Are you putting yourself out there? When we actually interview developers, and as Madeline said, you don't need to have Solidity programming to start. You really just need to have a fundamental language, and we can teach it. But when I actually ask a developer why do you want to work in this space, you get two reactions. You get one reaction where they'll talk about, well, I got early into Bitcoin, I made a whole lot of money, and I just want to keep on going. Or you actually find someone who says, you know what, this is a profound change in my life. I've learnt this, I've learnt that. I'm going out to this community. I'm really interested in this. I've got some stuff that I've been writing about. That's the difference. Those are the people you want to work with. Those are the ones that you want in your company, because those are the ones who actually will build value into your company. So if you're in this room and thinking about how can I get a career, or where do I start, hang on to what you know in terms of your SME, your subject matter expertise, but get out to the community. That's how we all started. There was no one around doing the work that we couldn't find a meetup group. We got the blockchain stuff, but that was always under the hood. It was always under the hood stuff, and we wanted to know why. Why do we want to learn about this technology? So we started meetups. And we created places so we can actually learn from other people, or actually like I met Amanda because she came along to my meetup. And, and we formed these great alliances, and I have these two amazing women sitting in front of me with Janelle and Susan, who are from Austrade, and they provide us the platforms to actually find our voices. But you've got to have skin in the game. It's not about being in between the lines. You've got to take a risk, you've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to be bloody hungry, because it is hard tech. Trust me, it's bloody hard tech. Because most of the work we do is around education.
So for folks that are a little bit concerned around a lot of times women are risk averse, right? And so I run into this when I'm discussing blockchain as well. and I tell them to focus on the blockchain for business scenarios, right? You don't necessarily have to look at cryptocurrency. There are scenarios in every business, in education, finance, supply chain. Basically, businesses spend a fortune every year on intermediaries and having folks do audits and all of this kind of stuff that you can automate with blockchain and make it go away and save your businesses a ton of money. So if cryptocurrency makes you nervous because of the fluctuations and you're like, I'm not sure I want to go into that from a career perspective, just think about it from a blockchain for business perspective, regular business options that you can look at, and that's a lot less scary. You still have skin in the game, but for a lot of women, cryptocurrencies are nerve-wracking. They don't want to look at that. They don't want to put their hard-earned money into it. Not yet. We'll get there. But from just the business scenario, sometimes I've discovered that's a lot easier for them to absorb. And if I approach education with them from that way, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, what do you mean it would make all that work I have to do and prep for that audit go away? Or it makes that financial supply chain Excel spreadsheet I have to update for 3 days a month go away. And all of a sudden they're looking at it from a real world perspective, and they're willing to learn a heck of a lot more about it and take it back to into their business.
I think that's a good point, but the thing to add to that is that blockchain technology solves really big problems, and it's not about being a single stakeholder in that ledger. You need to have multiple stakeholders that have a shared interest in a transaction. So that data has to exist outside of your organisation, because this is decentralisation. Now that's very nerve-wracking when you've got leadership sitting there going, no, this is my data, it's going to sit in my spreadsheet, in my central server. And now you're asking me to decentralise it and other people can see it. So that's a very confronting moment when you are talking to organisations about this technology. So we do a lot of education in the first instance, a lot about, the differentiation, what is the difference between Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and blockchain, and what does that all mean? So, and I think one of the interesting things is that we've been in this business for a long time, but we forget that the world is still catching up. And that sometimes is our disadvantage, because we want everything to happen now, and we know we still have to keep on waiting.
I'll actually push back just a little bit. We use blockchain. We use it internally. We don't necessarily share it out, and we have good legal reasons for doing so. So if you only focus on the decentralization of it outside of your org, then you're missing huge business opportunities internally for companies, especially global companies.
Yeah, I agree on that. I guess because we work in the space on solving some problems that require multiple stakeholders that have an interest. This technology is expensive in the first instance. We all have to agree on that. So if you're doing efficiencies in your own organisation, that's fine. But are you realising the potential of the technology? Why are you using blockchain if it's just the efficiency of your own back end?
Trust.
Yeah.
But but is that within your own organisation?
But yes, because of cost issues.
But I'm saying, but it's multiple jurisdictional though, isn't it?
But even though, I could give you, we can take it offline. I work for Microsoft, and I work in business operations, right? And so we support the backbone of the business globally. But you can use blockchain in so many instances that just within the U.S. For example, that have nothing to do with distrust, but it has everything to do with government oversight and audit.
Yes.
Right? So if I can make my audits go away and it's 100% audit ready at any time, that for us, that's a huge efficiency and cost savings that makes it completely worthwhile.
Yeah, we call that the cost of trust. Yeah, because it's very expensive.
Since we have such a brain's trust in this room, what do you guys recommend, or what's been your experience in educating policymakers and government officials on blockchain and the use thereof?
I'm not going to answer this.
Yeah.
Katrina's
Katrina's the expert here.
You're allowed one positive and one.
Look, there's a lot of ways to answer that, and I guess it's contextual. it comes down to leadership. It really does. We have been very fortunate to work with the Australian government on a number of initiatives that's taken us globally, but they're only one organisation. What we are needing in this country to get us all on board is having a national blockchain strategy. That was announced by Minister Karen Andrews at the ADC Blockchain Conference in March this year, before the federal election. Now, we know that they announced that because they thought they weren't going to get re-elected. Now they have to deliver on it. So we're starting to see some interesting conversations within government, and Susan and Janelle, who are representing the government here, can actually sort of have conversations outside this walls about what's going on. But I see that the challenge is that this technology will disrupt jobs, period. We all understand that. Now, if you're in government and you're facing an election year, and you may be looking at this technology which will require a reduction in work, in jobs, it's a scary thing. So you've got to turn it around and have a different conversation with government, and it comes down to operational efficiencies, cost of trust, removing audits, becoming a lot more data integrity, the ability to actually turn around and change citizens' experience with government. But this requires a very mature conversation, and I don't think we're having that yet. And that's why we all sit up here and grind this out on a daily basis for the last 3 or 5 years, because we want to have this conversation with the Australian government, within government, all around Australia. It's happening in various different stages, but it's not happening in a unison voice. And that's a challenge for us, because we don't want chain arbitrage. You know, we think about the rail gauge challenge that we had as a nation as we were growing. This technology is our new digital infrastructure, and we need to get consensus of how that's going to evolve. No, but this is why why we have our voices. This is why I'm on the board of Blockchain Australia with Karen Cohen, and this is why we grind it out every week and have these conversations, because this will affect everybody. And we all need to be leaning in and having this conversation and saying, why is artificial intelligence getting all the money? And we're not even having a conversation around blockchain, when we need blockchain to give the integrity to the data that the AI is going to use. And we can apply smart contracts to actually control how the AI is going to move or change or go through its conditions of change. So it's frustrating, but this is why we're here. This is not an easy job. And if you are going to be coming and want to sit where we sit, you've got to have the endurance, and you've got to have that consistent getting up every day, because this stuff is hard, and have these conversations and finding your allies in the journey. But if you are in positions in your various jobs, and I don't know where you all come from, but if you ever have an opportunity to talk about this technology and why Australia needs to pay attention, please have those conversations, because we're seeing countries all around the world, emerging economies, who are going to leapfrog us. And we will become importers of this technology, not exporters. So this is why we do these things and get up and speak. But if you have those ability to influence, please use your voices. This is a transformational technology, and as Bernadette says, we only get these shots every 30 odd years. They come in cycles. And we can either sit back and watch other countries go hard, like I've been invited by the Prime Minister of Bangladesh to go and speak to them about why governments should be exploring this technology, yet I can't even have this conversation in my own country. We have 4 reasons why we will have a different future in this country. It's because we need to solve scalability, we need to solve security, we need to look at regulation and governance, but the most important thing is education. If we don't have education on the agenda, we will be left behind. So sorry to get on my soapbox, but I do this every day.
And I think the government,
Katrina.
yeah, I think the governments are still focusing more on the ICO sort of section as well.
Because we've just done the Treasury papers, the submissions for the ICOs. Kai, do you have a question?
I do. Maybe for Maddie. I'm just wondering what happens when all the Bitcoin has been mined.
So apparently that it will still retain its value then through transaction costs. That is what people believe. The miners will still accrue transaction costs that will go to them through a service fee. I think it's fixed.
So,
So
I
there's
believe it will
exciting
be a
times
fixed
ahead,
thing.
is that what you're
So-
saying? The economists will be watching
Well,
closely.
it's not going to happen, I think, until
2100.
2100. Yeah.
So what Madeline has just explained is that every time that a block is added to the Bitcoin, the miners get rewarded through whoever wins it first gets BTC. Once every coin has been mined, there's no more BTC to be incentivized. So then it'll move into transactions. But yes, it'll be about another 200 years or something.
105, I think,
years.
is what it is. Sorry, not off the top of my head, but yes, around
Still
then.
not, yeah, not my
Yeah.
Yeah, not my
Don't
problem.
worry, I'm here anyway.
That's really cool. I've actually always wanted to ask that, but being blockchain myself, I'm like, oh, I can't ask that question.
Yeah, and just speaking on the governance and working with governments, because I'm predominantly interested in the cryptocurrency applications of blockchain. Obviously, that cryptocurrency is born out of a reactionary movement against central banking and born out of the global financial crisis in creating an alternative currency that people can transact with freely outside of government control. There's obviously friction points there with how governments are going to interact with us as companies in the space. So with our company, we actually incorporated our trading entity in New Zealand about 1.5 years ago for the purpose of it had a very low cost of doing business and a very clear framework that they were working on over there. So that appealed to us as a startup. Yeah.
And that work that Madeline's talking about, I mean, Karen, we were with APAC Blockchain on Tuesday last week and had a private meeting with Senator Jane Hume, who's now our Minister for FinTech. So there's a wish list that the community are putting together for Senator Hume to take to her cabinet and her basically her departments to start to understand what token economy is going to look like. Now, this is not coming from the policymakers. This is coming from the people who are running crypto exchanges or businesses like Chantel and Madeline. It's us that are actually having, because we're the ones who actually have the experience, the knowledge, the close, what we're actually doing, and we're actually putting all of this together and assisting Senator Hume in her conversations with her departments and also her party. It was community that took the double GST off the BTC. That was a community that came together to have that conversation. The community have been doing their own self-regulation of crypto exchanges, not the government. We all took that to the government and said, this is what we're doing. So Off-Track have now adopted that. So this is so we are quite friendly in Australia, but again, it's all of the community that have been doing the heavy lifting, and we're waiting for the government to step in and say, right now, we've got this, thank you so much, now we'll just pay you to help us now going forward.
Do you have a question?
I did have a question. So I'm looking at your third column, which is find employment in the blockchain field, and
Yes.
I'm also thinking about some of the feedback about women being risk averse. And so if you think about women, traditionally we have less money to start with, we have less capital. We're more likely to be, if a marriage breaks up, we're going to end up raising kids with less of a paycheck and so forth. So what I'm wondering is if there's some kind of, and also I got into the web in the 90s as well, and I know very well that cycle. Like, it's like waiting for the perfect wave, and there is a sweet spot where you can get on it and just ride it, and things are developed while you're on the job, which is like the best way to learn.
Yes, exactly.
So I agree with that point. I'm wondering, for that third column around finding employment, is there some sort of recap that you could give for the room about what opportunities there are, or what those ladders would look like for someone who's coming into this emerging technology now? And I understand that with the caveat that, there's jobs on the web now that didn't exist. In 1995, who knew that Twitter was going to happen? Running social media for a living was something that people did not have the power to foresee. But as well as you can, could you give?
Yes, I guess from my point of view, so I'm involved in software development. We write an Ethereum client. So I think one of the things to keep in mind, so I guess I didn't realise how many opportunities there were in the field. I'm saying a whole lot of things at once. With there being a risk adverse, I have a job, I get a paycheck. I'm not out there like some of these women, forging my own path with my own company. So a lot of the fitting in with the decentralized ethos, a lot of the blockchain companies are actually remote first and they're globally distributed. So if you're just signed up to like programming ads in your local city, you might never see a lot of these jobs. It wasn't until I started realising all these globally distributed companies were out there, and I'm like, oh, there's heaps of jobs in these companies. So, and my job, I'd actually seen the ad, and I was like, that all sounds a bit too good to be true, because I work from home 100% of the time. Our company's completely distributed. I've got 3 young kids. It's probably the only way I could have a full-time job. But I saw the ad, I thought, that sounds really cool. Then I'm like, that can't be a real job ad. That can't be an actual job. sounds a bit crazy. And then one of my ex-colleagues actually worked there, and he rang me and he said, oh, we're looking for technical writers. You know, he's like, it'll sound a bit wacky when I tell you about it, but he's like, just hear me out. And you know, it's now coming up to 12 months since I've been in that job. But the thing is, too, with women being risk adverse, I never would have applied for that job ad. I looked at the job ad, I went, I don't have half those skills, I've never heard of blockchain. And Grant's like, no, it doesn't matter. He's like, just apply for it, you know, you'll be fine. And yeah, and I got the job, and it's great. But the thing is, I wouldn't have applied for it. So I think it's that thing about backing yourself. And if you're in like the software development, lots of these companies are like desperately trying to hire like Java developers. Like we've got like an open job ad. So yeah, there are lots of opportunities.
So
Yeah,
the question
I want to,
is,
sorry, can I?
what's a reasonable progression for people to have in mind? Like, for example, that in 2 years, I'm just making up numbers, in 2 years you could go from this level to that level, or I know it's not something where there's this linear progression that you see it in other fields that have these established ladders and stuff.
Can I just, from an HR perspective, so I think we have to get used to risk, right? Like my last permanent role was in insurance, right? And I still got made redundant, right? So there's no guarantee you can work for, you know, an Accenture, a McKinsey or an insurance company and you can still face that firing line. So I think being in emerging tech is risky. And I think having those planned careers, I think this is the future of work is going to change. But one thing is when you are in something that's successful and moving quickly, you know, you don't have that planned career. So in 2 years' time, I could be like the vice president of this company, or I could be, you know, in the next one. I think the startup world is interesting because you know, you join as the CFO or the CTO or the CRO or whatever, you know, these C-suite roles are available in the small. So it's whether you're, you know, big fish, small sea or the other way around. It is risky. It is emerging tech. It is risky. Like you mentioned, I think, you know, the internet times. I also rode that wave. I also did a startup, you know, joined a startup and rode the 2000 crash. But this is, you know, I guess if you can take your standard careers or you can go into something that's emerging tech and take a risk.
And I think, and I think as well, like if you are going to be going into a startup with basically majority of the companies within this space are startups, you're going to have to be prepared to wear multiple hats. I think at one point I was wearing 8 different hats, and that's going from being an investor, a founder, a graphic designer, marketer, to BD, to an accountant. Like I just had to wear multiple hats, but you have to be able to adapt.
I'm not asking for myself, I'm just wondering how I can engage and support other like young women that I meet and how to frame the conversation in a way that helps them understand what the affordances are and what possibilities that are realistic without feeling like, you know, maybe you might win the lottery, like maybe you might be the CTO. I mean, anything could happen.
So I think the thing with being able to wear multiple hats is actually a really huge advantage. Like for me coming in, when you come into these small, because yeah, again, I am like risk averse by nature and I'd always worked in big companies where, you know, this is your role. But I've been surprised by how much I've enjoyed, like the multiple, because it means you can actually jump in and you can get experience in a whole bunch of things really fast. Because if, you know, if there's a bunch of hats that are unfilled and you start going over them, there'll be nobody over there saying, hey, no, you know, stay in your lane. So it's actually a really good way to get, a huge amount of experience.
You learn a lot about yourself, I find, as well, because you actually learn about what it is that you like solely. So you might want to go down, and the beauty, I guess, about the way that you could frame it is, if you were to jump into a startup, you could basically jump into any role as long as you have an interest in it. But then you're going to be probably doing a lot more than what you intentionally are going in there to fulfill as that specific role, let's say as a marketer. You might end up doing accounts and things like that, but then you can, because you're part of it in the beginning, you can form that pathway with the company as opposed to going into, let's say, RACQ, you go in there as a marketer and you're basically on trend to being, let's say, the next CMO.
I think it comes down to who you are as a person too. I think if you're comfortable in working in a startup, that actually is changing all the time, that you're happy with that and you know that you have to dig in and lean in and do 50 hours to 70 hours a week, and like I do. But I think you've also got to understand that if you do have options to go to the big accounting firms and all that sort of stuff, the PwCs, the Accentures, if that's what you want to do, then go and find your voice in those companies and be really good at it, and be mindful that it's not just about being authentic and not just focus on sales and marketing. Not to be disrespectful, but we see a lot of people claim that they're experts in this space. Please don't claim that you're an expert. Nobody is an expert. The only person who's an expert is Satoshi Nakamoto.
And
Now,
nobody
if you're
knows
not,
what that is.
Exactly, we don't know that it is. Everyone is learning, so do not claim yourself to be an expert. I get so tired of seeing everyone claiming to be this in LinkedIn.
Can I just add one more thing? Just in the cryptocurrency industry, what I perceive as jobs that are really in demand at the moment are Java developers and back-end developers that are needed to develop this stuff. UI and UX developers, people that understand how these products can be used, because that's an area that needs a lot of work. And how humans are actually going to interact with software applications in this space.
Yep.
And thirdly, I would say crypto economists, people that are understanding how these tokens and cryptocurrencies work and what are their implementations and what does that mean in terms of incentives. Those are the three main areas. I think other parts of these companies would resemble traditional software companies in terms of their needs.
So we still, we need agile. That's how we work. So we need agile because when we do the development, it goes through exactly like we do with agile. It's software development. Just because it's got some Solidity blockchain elements in it doesn't detract us from being a company. We need, you need to know how to sell. You need to know how to actually communicate. You need to know how to do all that work. Just because we have, as I've said this every interview I get asked, just because we have blockchain in our name in the work we do doesn't mean that we are not a company like every other startup. Just because you have this tech in your product doesn't mean you're different. We still have to have a market proposition. We still have to have smart people at the table that can actually interpret, build relationships, sell the product, nurture, grow the company, think strategically. Blockchain is just a tool we're using to solve some problems. But I would say that UI, UX, critically important, storytellers, philosophers, people who understand governance, people who understand regulatory environments, who understand globally what's happening in this industry is very, very critical. People who are curious. That's the sort of people you want. Curiosity, the willingness to unlearn all the time. Don't say I'm only this and this is all I can do. And it's true. I mean, as Karen said, we'll spin out other companies. You could be the CEO of that one. Is there a question?
I think.
Sandra, do you have a question?
I was just going to comment really on something that you guys said earlier as a comment to you as well when you're talking to people, is that something that came through is what you were saying is that people tend, and I think women especially tend to do that, is self-select out. So, unless you can tick absolutely all the boxes, we would say, but no, we won't apply for that. Whereas I think sometimes men might be a bit more, if I can generalise, I don't think it's a good thing to generalise, but is other people can be more cavalier about it. Whereas I think, do not self-select out, just at least have a go. The other thing that came out is that it's not such a clear progression as but there are definite things out there that Karen and Madeline mentioned, like the Java developers and that sort of thing. But I think in this, because it's an emerging technology, we don't really know yet what might be other positions that come So I think it's sort of take a step out if you're passionate about it, interested in it, and see where your interests are. Because it could be, because it's so new, you're not really going to know exactly what you like. So if you're interested in it, have a go and see where it takes you.
I guess, yeah, my last bit of advice that if you are a university, if you are going through your degree, learn some languages. If you're doing law, go learn how to write solidity programming, think about what smart contracts will do. If you are at university, learn something to complement your discipline by understanding technology. It's really, really, that's probably, if I was to go back in time and I was in the audience and someone said to me, what should I be doing at university? Do what you passionately want to do, but think about technology, because we all have to be tech savvy. We all have to understand where technology is going to disrupt our disciplines, whether you're in agriculture, supply chains, finance, accounting, banking. This technology is going to wipe everything. It's just going to disrupt everything. It's not going to step back and say, I'm only going to touch the financial services and that is that. If you are at university, learn. Even if you can't get the courses at university, go and learn online. There's podcasts, there's YouTube channels, there are meetups. You can get it everywhere. Yes, Amanda?
And books.
And
Books are
books.
great.
Books.
Can you talk to us about what internship opportunities exist in your, and they're clearly going to be unpaid, but you don't just need people to work in your companies, you need advocates, and they need to learn on
Yeah,
the job. So how to, I mean, that gives everyone else a leg up, even if they decide not to go into blockchain. It's so hard for students to get experience, and this seems like a really bright.
yeah, and I agree.
for that.
And I think it's exactly. I think internships are amazing for startups like ourselves, because we get to tap into the brightest minds. Those internships not necessarily have to be around coding or algorithms. It's, for me, I'm very much interested. We're just about to embark on some really interesting stuff about water trading, and I'm really interested in working with universities to say, are we delivering on the promise of blockchain technology? If we're able to create peer-to-peer markets and we can do transparency and blah, 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 is what we're doing delivering on the promise of blockchain technology? Now, that's not about from a technical perspective, that's from a behavioural perspective. Are we seeing changes in society in the way that irrigators are trading with each other because we're providing them the ability to do their own market making? Now, that will probably, I'd be interested in a PhD student who is looking at societal behaviour if we have transparency and trust in transactions. What can I learn from that as an organisation to ensure that our company is delivering value in the problems we're solving? To me, that is a really rich discipline and knowledge to have that would enhance my company and enhance the way our technology could be better be useful in the future. So I think it's broad. It's very broad.
As somebody who spent 30 years in software engineering, I really want to open the tent up and go back to what Eleanor said about envisioning the future. I would love to see social scientists, people who are studying peace and conflict resolution, because blockchain is being used for humanitarian purposes. And to the extent that we're envisioning the future, we need to be and bring into the tent the social scientists, the cultural anthropologists. Yes. So anybody who has who knows JavaScript and Python, etc., they're going to find their way into this space, no problem.
That's right.
But there could be some women in here who have, or additional people, allies, who have other backgrounds, and I think we really need to welcome them in and recognize doing social entrepreneurship is just as valuable as creating the next billion-dollar unicorn. And I'd like to see more emphasis on that.
Yeah.
Because it's up to us to bring that caring attitude.
And I'm really pleased that the social scientists, because I did my humanities degree in the 90s, and I remember finishing my degree and there was nothing for me to do. I wasn't valued at all. So I had to go do some really stupid, horrible careers before I got to this point. But I think if anyone is doing social science, ethics, philosophy, you're really onto something, because technology is going to need your thinking and your philosophy and ethics to inform how we frame our companies and solve problems. It's not a degree that is the end of the line anymore. It's actually sitting at the top. So if you're not interested in, if you're not a really natural technologist, but you are a natural thinker or a problem solver or a philosopher, we need people like you in this industry. Absolutely, because we're going to need to have these really rigorous conversations around jurisdictions, ethics, war and conflict, law, migration. It's huge.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think too, like we as companies need to be ambitious enough to address this sort of stuff. And I think we can do that in Brisbane and in Australia. There's no reason we can't, you know, so there's no reason we can broaden the scope of what we want to achieve to be that ambitious to include people like this in our companies.
Yeah, I think just to the last point around internship, we need everything. We need help, you know, and, you know, if you come up to a project and you like the idea, you know, you see an Amber, you go, oh, it's awesome, how can I help? We'd be like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, we'll take your internship, we'll take your ideas, and eventually we'll feel guilty and somehow manage to get you paid somehow. So yeah, don't be afraid to come up, see a project that needs help and offer it and get involved. And it's a really amazing, friendly, wonderful community. That's one thing I can say. So yeah, just get to know us a bit better.
That's actually what we did. A lot of the, I think 3 of our full-timers were actually internships. And then we ended up employing them because we just couldn't let them go. But they had the passion behind them. Yeah. So it was great.
That's a good point. It's about the problem that you're passionate about solving, and find those companies that are actually aligned with your values, because this is hard work. And you've got to get yourself up every day, out of bed, trundle yourself out and be ready for this, because you only know 40% of your day of what you'll do. The rest is just, it'll come at you. So you've got to be really passionate about this. And I think once you find your passion, then find your alignment with those companies that are solving those problems that you want to be part of.
Does anyone have a question at all for us? At all? Any more questions?
You all want to come work in blockchain now? Great.
Yeah, come on.
I was going to say, like, the passion. It's a great place to work, though, because everybody's passionate. Yeah, like, I've worked in other jobs where, like, you know, lots of people are just kind of turning up and going through their day.
There's a reason.
Yeah, but here, like, yeah, you get into it and you're like, wow, everybody is, you know, you're up here and you meet people like, you know, Katrina, and, you know, you're going to change the world. And it's, you know, it's really fun to work with people who are really excited to get up and come to work. Like, it is hard work, but if you want to do it, then, yeah, it's great.
And you do find the ability to find your voice. I think that's one of the things that we all talk about. Like, we were in Sydney last week for the Women in Blockchain, and I'd just been to a meeting with the Australian Stock Exchange because they're actually replacing CHESS with DLT. And I didn't realise, but the majority of the people who are in the backgrounds working on the problem are women. And I got to meet some of them. So I said, hey, come to the Sydney Women in Blockchain meetup, and they did. And what they were so inspired about is that nobody had ever asked them to speak before. Because I was in meetings and it's always the bloke's always talking. And we got these women along to the Sydney Women in Blockchain, and I asked them, I said, please come and find your voice. And now they all are, because they finally found a place that actually said, you know what, you're worthy, you're actually working on some really interesting stuff that is bleeding edge and leading the world. Come and find your voice, because we all want to hear your stories. And it just takes that moment when you meet someone that actually says, you know what, find your voice, because nobody will actually find it for you. You've got to do it yourself.
And stay true to it.
Authentically. Absolutely, because people will suss it out if you're embellishing or if you're making stuff up. If you're going to make stuff up, make up good stuff. But yeah, that's how we all got started. Nobody was standing there in front of us saying you can't do it. We just kind of went, you know what? It's time. And you are nervous at the start. You kind of go, this is crazy. What am I saying this stuff for?
And I feel like because it's emerging tech, sometimes it feels like there isn't barriers yet. I feel like you can just kind of throw yourself in there with like not a lot of necessarily subject matter expertise. And like, well, I don't know, like that's what I felt, you know, a couple, 3 or 4 years back. It was like, well, you know, I understand economics, so I'll just kind of learn this as I go because there isn't a barrier.
It allows you to be really creative.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
It's very fun, yeah.